Some educators don't just teach, they empower. Today's guest has spent over 2 decades making a lasting impact on English language learners and the educators who support them.
Intentional and purposeful focus on building a culture of collaboration is the secret for leaders striving to make a difference. In building a culture of collaboration, Kurtis and Lorna will share simple tips, ideas, and strategies to take your organization's collaborative efforts to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of Building a Culture of Collaboration. I'm Lorna
And I'm Kurtis Houston. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Andrea Bitner. Andrea is an English language learner educator, an international author, and dynamic speaker with 24 years of experience working with students from around the world. She's the author of Take Me Home, a powerful collection of real student success stories about the journey to bilingualism in America, and a contributor to multiple influential education books and articles. Andrea is passionate about helping educators confidently support EL learners and support meaningful connections with their families. We can't wait to dive into this conversation. So let's get started. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us on Building a Culture of Collaboration.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So I've gotten to know Andrea over the last year or so, being able to connect with the work that she does and through our work as well. But for those that are listening or viewing, just give us a little bit of background where you're joining us from, Andrea, and just a small little taste of the journey that's brought you to this point.
Yes, sure. So I am based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, here in the U.S. And like you mentioned, I've been teaching. I'm going into my 25th year in education. I figured out this year that I've literally taught every grade level through my career so far. And 17 of the 25 years that I've worked in this field has been spent as a support teacher. So I've worked as a Title I reading specialist, a high school English teacher, and an EL teacher, in addition to mentoring new teachers. So it's really great.
Isn't it funny when any of us get into education, none of us have a checklist that says, okay, I'll do grade 1 at this point, and then I'll do some senior high here. And, I'm just like a scavenger hunt that I'm just going to, through my career, go check, 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 check until I get the whole thing completed. But it's always on the look back where you go, oh my goodness. A, the years have piled up quicker than I thought. And B, I've actually gone into a lot of different roles.
Yeah, for sure. It's like not how you start out, and then you just take a look in that rear view mirror and you're like, oh, I did that.
I know.
It's
so incredible.
I had a portion of my career taught at the post-secondary level with teachers in education or pre-service teachers in an education faculty. And you'd always have the exercise or the conversation around, okay, where would you like to be? The 5-year, 10-year kind of thing. And I always giggled a little bit when someone would say, I think I'm going to like to teach grade 3 mathematics. Okay.
Good luck with that.
We wish you all the best. I don't think it'll turn out that way, but best of luck.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
It's always that as other duties assigned.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Well, Andrea, we'd love to be able to hear an experience that you've had that had significant impact on you as an educator and, more importantly, as the teacher you are today.
I think that the most memorable impact I've had, there are many moments, but when I was thinking about this, I thought my first year of teaching. And I remember coming out of college, I was hired over the weekend, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, back to my alma mater, which I'd graduated from years before. And I was given what were considered at the time some of the toughest kids in the building. They were high school freshmen. And I expected them to love school as much as I did, right? Because I was obviously becoming a teacher. I had just got done student teaching. I was with kids that were intrinsically motivated, that loved being in school. We're eating up the information. We're putting down what I was putting out, right? All those things. And so when I walked into that freshman classroom and I was with kids that hated school, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I remember going home and doing a lot of crying because every day I was like, how can I reach them? How can I help them? Why don't they love it? And what I quickly discovered within a month or two was that the reason they hated school was because they were freshmen who didn't know how to read. And I felt really unequipped at that time because I had studied and learned how to become a content area English high school teacher, but I had never had the lens of what do you do for a student who comes in at 14 years old and you're expected to teach them a curriculum and they don't know how to read it. And I didn't know about the resources in the building, right? Or how to team up at that first year with reading specialists and interventionists, right? And to gain feedback from mentor teachers. I felt like I had to do it all myself, which I think was a mistake at the time. But really, they impacted more me, I think, that year than I could ever have impacted them because they taught me all about the true diversity that lies in the needs of our students. And I think that that was really impactful for me. And I still remember their faces today.
That's awesome. And I mean, there's a bright side to that. And I think every teacher can experience that same place at different points in their career of, I was at a loss. I didn't know what to do, but through some trial and error, I figured it out. But this is actually one of the reasons why we initiated this podcast and do the work that we do, because there's that moment for you as a beginning teacher where you feel isolated, you feel on your own. And what if we could come into a school where that was never the expected experience, that right away, there's a team here that we're going to work towards. So we're going to get to that here, but I wanted to just note that as we're going through. So let's fast forward a few years then. And I've heard the story of how your book, Take Me Home, came to be. But it's one that I know Lorna hasn't heard, but our audience as well. It was powerful, and it certainly didn't come from a place of, I'd like to write a book. I wonder what I should write about. It was a very different experience. Could you share that with our audience? Because I think it'll be important for where we're going to go next in the conversation.
Yes, I mean, thank you so much for asking. So Take Me Home is a true story. And it's based on the true stories of 11 of my alumni bilingual students who shared what it was like to become bilingual in America. And about 10 years ago, I was working with about 40 students with about 25 different languages at the high school level. And they came from all walks of life. I had kids that had crossed the border. I had kids who were adopted. I had exchange students. I had refugee students. I had students that had waited 10 years for a visa and came after their parents. I had kids that waited 10 years for a visa and came before their parents. And I had kids that were born here, because we know now in the US that most of our multilingual students are born here in the United States. And so at that time, we had this mentality called, what's your plan? And we had this classroom banner that hung in our room. And it said, education is opportunity. Education is freedom. What's your plan? Because our kids knew that their only plan couldn't be, I'm going back to my country right now, or I'm going back to the state I just moved from, or back down the street from the district I just switched over from. And so we work with these students through this mentality. And at the time, we had this very powerful day called Alumni Day, where our alumni students would come back and they would bring our students a t-shirt that were seniors. And on that t-shirt, it would say wherever they were headed next. We didn't mind if it was university, community college, vocational training, workforce, military, edupreneur, entrepreneur, whatever it was. We were excited to celebrate that they had completed this chapter of their life's plan, and they would get to sign that banner. And so I worked with one particular family at the time, the Lopez family, and I had taught all 7 of their children. And it was all boys and 1 girl. And we started with Sergio, and they happened to be from El Salvador. And I've been to El Salvador 3 times myself to do some work with schools down there over that time. And so I worked with all of them, and from Sergio all the way down to Nancy. She was the youngest female and the only female in the family. And they all signed that banner and completed this great plan. And about a year after I was finished teaching that family, I was teaching one day and there were a bunch of helicopters outside. And I was like, wow, what's going on? Something's up today. There's a lot of helicopters outside. And about an hour after I had that thought, my principal came down to get me to let me know that one of my students had been hit by the train. And unfortunately, that student was Nancy. And unfortunately, she passed away that day. She had made a choice to put on a pair of headphones and walked along the inside of the train tracks. And she was clipped from behind by the Acela. But one of the most troubling parts of that day, in addition to the trauma that it caused our school community, our families, our students, etc., was that mom and dad were still learning English themselves. And so when they got the call that something had happened to one of the kids, no one on the local force spoke Spanish. And so they kind of knew that something was wrong. And they kind of knew that something had happened to one of the children, but they didn't know which one it was. So they went up to the tracks for hours, and they were standing there and waiting and calling and trying to communicate and get help to navigate this situation. So at the time, in the coming weeks, right, we worked with immigration, we worked with the funeral home, we worked with mom and dad to help them navigate the process. We supported the students and everyone else involved. And one of my jobs was to speak at her funeral. And so I created this short poem at the time, and I called it Take Me Home. And it was an homage to Nancy's crossing into the US. She happened to be one of our kids that had crossed the border. And I let that poem sit on my desk for probably a good few months after that experience. And one day I saw it sitting there, and I thought, well, maybe something about this story could be helpful to someone. And so I sent that poem out on a whim. And a couple months later, a publisher gets back to me, and they're like, hey, Andrea, we really like your poem, but we don't want you to write a poem. We want you to write a book. And we're going to give you 6 months to do it. And if you come back with something we like, we'll take you on and publish it. And I started to think, well, I don't just want to tell her story. I want to tell all of their stories because they're so different. And a lot of people make a lot of assumptions about the label English learner on a piece of paper from a certain place.
Absolutely.
And so with those experiences, I went back and found 11 of my alumni who were now in their late 20s, early 30s. And we had about 6 months worth of conversations about what school was like for them. And we created Take Me Home, the true story of our students who tell what it was like to become bilingual. We hit almost every continent, and we hit almost every experience that we could think of. And I wanted to show the true diversity that lies behind the experiences and education that our students came with. And we also included the perspective of someone that was born here, because I think that that's really important as well. Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, we're really proud of it. It's been read by thousands of readers, middle school students, high school students, educators, school leaders, used in PLCs, etc. And it's creating a lot of conversation, reflection, and connection around the country.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I get goosebumps when you're talking about it.
You'd like it. So Andrea, to me, I want to get to the collaborative nature of this, because I think you raise a really good point, and we talk about this often, that sometimes the label that we put on our learners or human beings in general, if it was as easy to just create the label, define the label, and then give the manual for how to support the label, then we wouldn't need collaboration at all. We just need training for this. But to be able to say an ELL student is not a descriptor of the individual. It's just a way for us to start to recognize that they have some different needs than others, but then there is no one path. We often talk about it the same of a student who's labeled autistic. Well, that's, again, an overarching label. How the strengths, the experiences, the specific needs are so different, which is why one person could not get trained in every one. We need that collaborative team to be able to bring collective expertise together. So love for you to talk about that idea of how do we create that collective expertise when it comes to supporting diverse needs of learners, whether they are students that are learning an additional language, students that are coming to our country from other locations, whatever those needs are.
Yeah, it's such a great point, right? Because if you think about it in terms of the English language learner world and in many worlds of students that come with what you're talking about, right? That these different needs, right? These different labels. In our world, 80% of the day, English learners aren't with their EL teacher. They're with the rest of the school community, right? We service them so many days per week, depending on the required amount of minutes, depending on their proficiency levels, right? They're coming in with all these different experiences. And so it's really important with that in mind that your entire building be aware of who those students with significant needs are. And I mean from the cafeteria team to the transportation team, to the front office team, to the main office, to the education support teachers, to your content teachers, etc. Because you want them to feel successful throughout their school day, not just in the four walls of the EL teacher's classroom, right? And I actually wrote a collaborative piece that talks all about how, in a loving way, the EL student is not the sole responsibility of the EL teacher. And that, I think, comes with anyone. And that's why that collaborative piece is so important, because when they do come into the building, whether it be they've always been in the US or from a newcomer, right, from a different country or from a state over, it takes all hands on deck to support the needs of that kid. The emotional needs, the social needs, the academic needs. So everyone even just being aware of what your services are in your school and what the different roles are of all the stakeholders, so that when you need to develop a plan for a student, you know who to go to, is really important. We've put that into place, I want to say, successfully, even from our registration, step one, all the way down to the building level. Because, for example, when a student registers in our district, in the front office registration, they've been trained, what resources can they use to access information to families? What communication devices are they going to need? What language does the family prefer? And then once they have checked off that home language survey, that email gets kicked right out to my director, which gets kicked right out to our EL teachers. And then we act as the distributors of information. Once we start to, I say, look for the movie, right? Not the snapshot. So it's really important that you have that lineage, that process in line, and everybody's aware of it.
Well, and you're creating systems to be able to respond so that it's not one person's responsibility. I reflect on listening to Richard Dufour talk about, our institution of education has created a lottery, in a sense, in the past, where you're in one classroom with an exceptional amount of skill, background, and expertise to support this one learner, while I'm next door as potentially a new teacher who does not have that skill set. And we just hope that the student that needs the support gets, luckily, gets into the right room, where you don't want the success or lack thereof of a student to be left to that kind of chance. It should be, like you said, they're our student. It doesn't matter what classroom they're in block 4. They're all ours.
They are, right? And the way I kind of visualize it is, if you think of a pair of glasses, it takes the lens of both the EL teacher and the content teacher to have a clear vision for a student. And you can't be successful without one or the other, right? And so I always, when I team up with teachers, I always say no one achieves success alone. And it's really important to put on both lenses, because that way, for example, when I co-teach with teachers, I have a pulse on what's happening in the content class. I can pull a small group and flexible grouping. Then we pull out, a few days a week for the extra English support. But we're constantly in conversation. We're constantly in reflection together. We're constantly tweaking the plan because we have the same vision. And so giving teachers access, like you're saying, not in a silo next door, just crossing your fingers and hoping that teacher or scheduling that student to make sure they receive, I don't want to say the best equipped teacher, but the teacher that is most confident with the most knowledge isn't the most successful way to go. I agree.
Yeah. Well, and there could be a situation of, it's not just about supporting the student, but how do we support each other as adults so that we don't just say, oh, well, this student has these needs, we'll put them in Andrea's classroom always. Well, we're not helping to grow our system. How can we create mechanisms where I can learn from Andrea through this process?
Yes. And I think of it even as in a way of saying, I encourage teachers, to burst their own bubble, right? Because you tend to live what I call, like in school, on your block, right? You're with, especially at the elementary level, right? Or even at the high school level, you're in your department, right? And so we don't get an opportunity enough as educators to burst our bubble and connect with other educators, whether it be within our own building, heck, even within our own district. Like where I'm from, we've got 4 elementary schools with 4 sets of middle school teachers with 1 central high school. It's not often that the teachers from the elementary schools get to go see what's happening in other elementary schools, or, hey, 5 minutes down the street in a district. So we've really worked hard on the idea of creating monthly Zoom calls where all of our, for example, EL teachers in the county connect once a month, and someone leads it, and we've got an agenda, and it's a very productive session. We're sharing resources. We're coming up with challenges. We're asking for feedback. Or, hey, did you get that state update? Right. And so all of the brainstorming takes you out of your silo, it gives you resources, and it helps you get out of that bubble. And I think it's a great opportunity for schools to do that.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. Andrea, you're part of a new collection called Culture First Classrooms. And our friend Darren Papard, who we've had on a couple of episodes ago, tell us a little bit more about that project and the role that you played in its recent release.
We'll be right back to continue this episode.
Looking for practical strategies to use data effectively? Imagine classrooms where learning is personalized, student success is driven by insights, and school culture thrives on informed decisions. Join us for Data in Education, a virtual summit on June 10th and 11th. Discover new strategies from fellow educators and experts on data visualization, data culture, and data literacy. Learn how to create actionable dashboards, foster a positive data-informed culture, and use data to track and celebrate student growth. We are also super excited that Kurtis will be the keynote speaker for this event. This virtual summit is for educators, school leaders, and anyone else who wants to increase their impact on student success. Don't miss this opportunity to learn and collaborate with educators from all over. Register now at bit.ly/Data Summit 2025.
And now back to our conversation.
I feel really honored and proud to be a part of this project. Katie Kinder and Darren Peppard I have connected in various lanes throughout the past few years. And they had reached out and said, hey, we're going to ask about 24 or 25 educators from across the United States to contribute to this Culture First Classrooms book. Would you like to be a part of it? And I was like, absolutely. And so I was tasked with writing about my experiences and how we helped establish school culture in a collaborative way. And so my chapter is called School is Not a Holding Place, It's a Launching Pad. And the focus of that chapter is really student-centered in getting students, again, out of their proverbial bubble, into the community to practice their reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills in authentic ways. And again, engaging the community to feel that sense of pride of, wow, look at these amazing bilingual students we have right here in our community. And I shout it to the rooftops. We take district-wide K through 12 community trips where we connect all of our EL students district-wide. And we take them out into the community 4 times a year. And we did this through some grant work. And they get to go to the local orchards. They get to go out to lunches, bowling trips. They get to go and listen to speakers. We just took our high school students up to an amazing speaker a few weeks ago. But what's really cool about it is seeing how the community is impressed with these young people and letting them feel that sense of my bilingualism is an asset right now. And look how I can use it in the future to communicate with more people. And in addition to that, it's really cool to see our high school and middle school kids connect with the elementary students because they're creating the path of this is where you're headed.
Yeah.
And and this is what you can do. And a lot of times siblings and cousins get to travel together on those trips. And that's really fun. They're like, oh my gosh, my brother's coming, my cousin's coming, right? and that was an unexpected benefit, when we started that years ago. So our kids ask us every day all year, when is the next experience? Because they make friends, they get out of their own silos, and they get to engage with the community. And finally, what I'd like to say about that is in our district in particular, our kids become the leaders of their families very quickly, right? Because they're being educated for free. They're getting to acquire their language, where sometimes mom and dad are at work and they're not getting the opportunity to go out and take English speaking classes to learn more because they're working and supporting their family. So then they take their families back to these places where they act as leaders.
That is such an incredible opportunity for those kids and for the families because they, that chance to be able to live and learn through those experiences. And oh my gosh, how much they'd be learning through those experiences are amazing.
And really, sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, I was just going to say, and that's what I expand upon in this book, in this chapter of the book. I talk about lots of things we do like that.
Oh,
That
that's
is
beautiful.
awesome. We'll make sure that we link that in the
Yeah.
show notes, but it's Culture First Classrooms, and I'll let everyone know, available on Amazon. It was released, I think it was last week, wasn't it? Or was it
Yeah,
early this week?
17. Mhm.
Yeah. Um, so I really love this idea of flipping the script.
Mhm.
The idea that just your learning of the English language right now, 15 years ago, we see this as, well, it's a need. It's almost like a deficit that we look through. But when you can flip the script and say, "Nah, this is a superpower." You have another language that most of the people around you do not, and in some cases, several. I began my teaching career in a northern community, Mennonite community, where a lot of most of the children in the community members spoke Low German, and we would be in school, and I can remember even at that point as a young teacher when someone would be expressing about, oh, the student's not meeting expectations and they have a lot of exceptional needs that are in place, where in my head I'm going, yeah, but I've heard that kid on the playground flip between Low German and English without even losing a beat. I cannot even fathom being able to do that. It's insane when you think about that as a skill set rather than well, we need to fix this lack of language.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I always say that, being an English learner is not a condition.
No.
No.
It's not even really a transition. It's more of, like you're saying, it's an expansion of skills.
Yeah.
They're coming to you with a skill set, and over a period of time, you could be in it for the short game or the long game, depending on their literacy and their first language and their school experiences. You are playing a vital role in this chapter of their lives.
Yeah.
And so, but over time, they are going to acquire the skills necessary to be successfully proficient and become bilingual. And so, absolutely. The other thing I think is important for people to kind of remember is that kids don't just know they're bilingual, especially in the primary ages. They don't realize they're bilingual, in my experiences, until about third grade. And I realized that when one day my student Sophie, who was in second grade, was sitting there, and I'm like, "Sophie, you're so amazing. You know you're bilingual. Do you know what that means?" And she looked at me and she goes, "Miss B, I just say one thing to mommy and say a different thing to you." It was like that simple to her, because her brain physically knows what to do, right? It knows to look at mom, and it knows what to do, and look at me, knows what to do. But right around third grade is when my kids start to go, "Oh, like I can do something that my friends can't."
Yeah.
Like I can speak Spanish and he doesn't too, right? Or I can speak Arabic. We have 31 languages in my district. And so, but around sixth grade is when I see another shift, when they start to go, "Well, I don't want anybody to know I'm bilingual."
Yeah.
Because that makes me different.
Right.
And so it's really heartbreaking to witness that. But then we start to pump them up by letting them connect with those high school kids to see the opportunities. And by the time they're in high school, we're like, "You tell everybody you're bilingual."
Yeah.
Because that's going to help you be a global leader, colleges, university, all the things, right? And so it's interesting for me to watch that transition.
Yeah.
Andrea, so
that's amazing.
as I'm listening to you speak, I repeatedly hear we. And to us, evidence of a strong system of collaboration is when it's not when I am in my classroom doing this, it's we. So you've talked about the collaboration between your English language teachers and your content area teachers. You've talked about the collaboration between multiple teams within a school, and then even at the district team, the collaboration between schools. If you were to step back from each of those, what do you think are some of the conditions or specific things that actually contribute to that sense of we? Because we know just putting a slogan up on a wall, or or taking the Ted Lasso "Believe" poster and putting it above the door, it's representative, but that alone isn't going to change how you operate. And so, what are some of the conditions you think that have led to that we culture that is obviously supporting these students and their families?
I think for us, it starts at the leadership level. And, and using that vocabulary of we, our students, right? And so as an EL teacher, as, a person who is not only supporting the students, but supporting the teachers, I think it's important that, we always have that type of conversation. This is our student. What are we going to do? How can we team up?
Yeah,
And I think that something
language.
else that has contributed to that is not only, that vision, right? That vision of both lenses being appreciated, but teachers feeling confidence and appreciation from their colleagues, right? And so what I mean by that is, for example, I have my EL students send quick videos to their teachers thanking them for helping them. I have them write emails to them, helping them, thanking them for helping them. I have had, we do something in our school called Made an Impact Day, where kids get to go around with these little t-shirts that says Made an Impact and give them to teachers anywhere in the district that have ever helped them. And so teachers see, right, that collegiality, that gratefulness, that appreciation for each other, and all of the intelligence that they bring to the table. And when the district gives us opportunities, and I think this is an important piece as well, to sit down with each other, right? To talk to each other, to do training within your own district and have people show what they know. It helps people really not only appreciate, but have a sense of confidence in their colleagues, because when people see who you are and you show them that you're there to help them, they will open the door for you to come in and support them. But that takes time, right? And so I think that it's really important as that EL teacher or any teacher to be willing to learn, to be willing to make mistakes, and to be willing to be transparent. Like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. And it's okay, but to be in a safe space, to be able to say that. And then at the same time, to have the same kind of mindset around, for me, it's our EL students, which is we have all been professionally developed, not only by our team, but by outside people as well, with continued learning, not just a one and done, or I call it a spray and pray that people use it, right? So it's like, the commitment to coaching, the commitment to continued conversation, the commitment to trial and error. And through that, we've come to some central beliefs, which is lack of language never equals lack of intelligence. Yeah. Our teachers know that, right? They also know that all of our parents don't prefer their first language, and they know what resources to access in order to support communication with them. And they also really believe that we are all teachers of our else. And I think with those three pieces in place, that was our starting point for continued development. I hope I'm answering your question. I feel like I'm going.
No, love it.
Yeah, and again, I think there's modeling of language you spoke of, creating a clear vision, creating opportunities for people to work together, and then just continually reinforcing that mindset. What I heard was the space to be vulnerable is really important, and it's liberating to say, I don't know what to do. And I'm not saying it as a handoff, but more as an invitation that help me learn, show me what this looks like. Andrea, how do you do this within your room? We often say in our work, when we've got really strong cultures of collaboration, everyone in that space is an expert and everyone is a learner, meaning that every person has expertise. I don't care if this is going into your 25th year or someone that's starting their first week. Everybody has some expertise to provide, but nobody has this figured out completely. There's all another thing that we could learn to help support our students.
It couldn't be more true. I mean, when I think about it, I always say to myself, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
Yeah.
I need to continue to learn. When you signed up to be a teacher, you signed up to be a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
That, because education's always changing. Yeah. And so I think that when you sit down and really think about it, children are not widgets. They're not going to stay the same. Their needs, their strengths, their life experiences, and you get to contribute to this chapter. So why not learn the most you can from the people you spend the most time with to contribite to that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what, Andrea, you at the very beginning, you were talking a little bit about having a banner, and on that banner, you ask the question, what's your plan? And I understand it's more than just what's your plan, it's what's your PLAN. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that means.
Sure.
We'll be right back to continue this episode. We have all felt like this before. when engaging in team meetings, feeling like our time is not being maximized or that this could have just been an email. As a leader, how can we ensure this is not the reality for everyone in the room? Rather than just simply coming together into a shared space, we really need to ensure that whenever we are engaging as a team in meetings, that the time is being utilized to its utmost and that we are truly seeing impact as a result of our conversations. My name is Kurtis Hewson, lead learner and co-founder of Jigsaw Learning. In this free on-demand webinar, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 planning considerations and then 5 facilitation considerations that you can put into place as a leader to take your team meetings to the next level. Access this webinar, and in addition to these 10 considerations, numerous free resources will be shared that you can begin using immediately. I can't wait to have you join me to learn how we can ensure that team meetings are having their optimal impact. And now back to our conversation.
So our PLAN stands for be proud, be loud, be ambitious, and never give up. And that applies not only to our students and families, but to our colleagues as well. Yeah. And it's important to help kids feel proud. What do your halls and walls look like in your building? Do your students see themselves in those halls and walls? Or, is your school, what I say, more of a bridge to your community, or is it more of a cliff where people feel they are unwanted or can't enter unless they meet a certain criteria? Yeah. And so creating that bridge, creating that sense of pride, making your halls and walls be about things that your kids care about, your families care about, representing their culture, their heritage, their interests, their community, right? Their businesses, helping kids see what they can be is really important in helping kids feel proud. And I always feel the best way to do that is to let them listen to the people that are just a little bit ahead of them to come back and talk to them. So we help that with that idea of proud. Be loud is, telling everybody that will listen about the fact in the EL world that you're bilingual, but in any school, it could be about anything great going on in your school. Yeah. An example would be here in our own district. As a parent, I've watched my daughter's district do teacher podcasts where they send them out to the parents. And so the superintendent is interviewing teachers in the district and then post them on their page. And it's like, hey, you want to know more about this teacher as a human being? Listen to this podcast. Listen to their stories.
That's great.
Right? It's great. They do an excellent newsletter once a month that features different things going on in the district. It's constant communication. That's part of being loud. Yeah. Being ambitious, an example of an ambitious teacher in our district that I'm really proud of is our high school Spanish teacher noticed that we had a particular pocket of Spanish-speaking students, and she wanted to continue to motivate them to want to not only learn English, but to increase their literacy in Spanish, right? Because a lot of times our kids will have the listening and speaking in their first language, but there's a gap or a stoppage, or they never learned to read and write in it. So she said, hey, why don't I create a program where our kids could come in and take the Spanish literacy classes in addition to the EL, and then in their junior or senior year could take a certification to become a certified interpreter and translator.
Oh, nice.
Let me tell you what that did for our students, because now not only do they see the value, they walk out of high school with a certified exam that they have passed to be a translator if they want to. Yeah. They don't have to use it, but it's really motivating for those kids to validate the skills that they're getting, and it keeps them wanting to be in school. And so ambition part is important. Constant communication with guidance counselors, sitting down with students to hear about their goals. A friend of mine, Josh Tovar, has surprise parent visits out in Texas. I've been out to a school to speak where parents come in and surprise their kids as honor roll of the month, or high school graduates where they put on the cap and gown and the parents waiting there with flowers on a normal school day. And so it's just engaging ambition, right? Keeping everybody in your cheer squad.
Oh, that's so
and
awesome.
Finally, never giving up, right? Learning English takes time.
Yeah.
And, depending on your background when you come in, it can take up to 5 to 10 years to master the language. And so really just never giving up on these students and being in it for the long game.
Oh, that's so amazing.
Beautiful.
And so empowering. And when students and families and teachers, when everyone understands what that PLAN means, and that it's not just an acronym that is on the wall, that you actually live it in your space. It's amazing.
So, Andrea, I would love to hear from your perspective. what advice would you give a leader? And we categorize a leader as anyone who is leading learning for someone else. And it may be an administrator, maybe a department head, it's a teacher in a classroom, it may be a student leading other students. What advice would you give a leader who is trying to build or sustain a culture of collaboration?
I think the advice that I would give that leader, it really would just refer back to the visual I had spoken about earlier, which was it takes several lenses to create a clear vision. And you need to make sure that you always are asking for feedback, diving into your resources, talking to your staff, being transparent, being willing to make mistakes, adjusting the vision as things change. And so when you can enroll your team on board to work together with one clear vision, I think that you will reach much success. Mm-hmm. If you come in thinking you can do it all alone, you'll never be successful. And that's what I learned from the very beginning, that no one achieves success alone. And when you're working with kids and families, you have to have everybody on deck.
I love when there's that clear nugget takeaway, and I'm going to use our mutual friend Darren Papard, who talked to us, and it stuck with me, the idea of lead from the balcony. Yes. And he shared a story that talks about going to the balcony, which overlooks his gym, to be able to watch the team, and it was as a metaphor for his leadership of, I need to take time to go up and reflect on what's happening. Mm-hmm. And he talks about, if I've said these are the key priorities, I sometimes have to go up to the balcony to just have a moment to look big picture and see, am I living these priorities? So he left us with lead from the balcony. You're going to leave us with several lenses to create a clear vision. Love it. That's a great way to look at that. So, Andrea, for any of our listeners that would love to get a hold of you for a conversation, to dive into any of your publications or articles, or even to come out and work with their teams, where would they get a hold of you?
You can find me a couple different places. You can visit my website, which is andreabitnerbooks.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn. You can find me at Bitner Andrea. In addition to that, you can find me on Twitter, same, Andrea Bitner. And I think Instagram a little bit, but really if you go to LinkedIn or you go to Twitter or you come onto the website, they would be the best places to reach out.
Okay, excellent. And we also have your email address, and we'll make sure that's in show notes as well. All right. Well, Andrea, this has been an absolute pleasure. Not just getting to know you, but having you as part of this conversation as well. We've been very lucky.
Amazing work that you are doing in your school. It makes me want to come and visit. Yeah. I want to come and see.
We're not that far away. I appreciate you both so much. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care, Andrea.
Thank you.
So, already mentioned it within the episode, but the statement of several lenses to create a clear vision, such a powerful message that really creates clarity for us of understanding that for us to get real sense of clarity and understanding, of course, you need multiple perspectives to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. I love that statement. We're going to be using that several times.
Yeah, no kidding. And to really take it one step further is thinking about, in order for us to understand a whole child, it isn't that one label.
Yeah, no.
It is about being able to have all those lenses on all of the things that are surrounding for that student or impacting that student. Yeah. So what's everything about that student that we can understand, and then to be able to generate programs for them.
So when we're thinking about that individual student, then nobody would hold all that information.
No.
Right? And we see this all the time within schools that this is why we have to collaborate, because you have a piece, I have a piece, someone else who knows the family a little better has a piece, and how do we connect this again? How do we bring all of our lenses together for a clear vision? So I had a thought. What if you took that acronym, the PLN, which is be proud, be loud, be ambitious, and never give up? Yeah. What if you were to apply that to teams and be able to say, in our organization, we're going to ask our teams to be proud, be able to share the work that they're doing and how the impact that they're seeing for it, to be loud, to be not afraid to be able to say, here's what our team's accomplished, here's what we've learned through the process, ambitious that we're going to continue to tackle issues that are important to us that may feel a little overwhelming, but okay, what could we do? Which then leads to and we'll never give up. Let's, when we don't have success, okay, let's come at it from a different angle. What else could we do? I think that's an acronym that has application in a lot of different ways.
In a lot of different ways. And I love how empowering it is for them in their school to have that acronym, for their students too, to sign that banner as they are moving on to that next step in their life. It's just amazing.
So I also want the note of the live on your block when it comes to schools. And we see this all the time of, well, I'm comfortable in my grade level team or in my faculty department or in my wing of the building. So we'd really encourage anyone watching or listening to this. We have a really powerful meeting structure that we call the collaborative team meeting, which actually creates a format where we can bring people from different disciplines, from different grade levels, depending on your organization, to really, in a productive, solution-focused, action-oriented way, look at needs of students and collaboratively respond. We have a course that explains what this collaborative team meeting looks like and how to effectively facilitate. It breaks down barriers in exactly the way that Andrea's talking, where we can collaborate with those on our block, like Andrea said, but this is going to burst that bubble.
That's right.
Through this structure.
She talked about how you need to look to burst your bubble, so that you aren't living in that one little space, but you have opportunity. And this provides that structure to do that. The other thing that really was evident, that they were intentionally designing systems of support. And that didn't just include what they were doing for students, but there was very specific intention in how people were collaborating and working together, and ensuring that that system of supports was starting all the way from when a student walked through the door in registration.
When the family, and then how do we support the family as well?
All the way to when they graduated, what came next after that.
Importance of systems, absolutely. So as always, please check out the information to be able to connect with Andrea. Such great expertise and insights around how we can support. I would argue any student, but really appreciate the work that she's doing. As always, please share out this episode. Be able to like, comment, review will help us continue to reach more individuals with the great messages from Andrea and other guests like her. And as always, we wish you all the best and in your continued work of building robust cultures of collaboration. Take care, everyone.
See you soon.
Jigsaw Learning, founded by Kurtis and Lorna Houston, is a team of educators who work with schools, districts, and educational leaders to establish collaborative response to ensure success for all students. Because every child deserves a team.